This is the song that exposed a millionaire CEO's darkest secret and changed one woman's life forever. What you're about to hear isn't just music. It's the moment Desiree Williams chose truth over silence, dignity over desperation, and love over lies. She sang these words while 6 months pregnant with his twins, standing on the stage at his wedding to another woman.
You said you loved me when the lights were low, whispered promises you'd never show.
You said you loved me when the lights were low, whispered promises you never showed. But when the morning came and truth broke through, I found out who you really were and what you do. You left me broken, thought I'd disappear, but I'm still standing, though you're not here. You left me, but love stayed. You left me, but love stayed. In every breath these babies take, in every choice that I will make, you left me, but love stayed. These little hearts are beating strong and true. They'll never know the pain you put me through. I'll teach them love is more than just a word. It's showing up when promises are heard. You took my job, my dreams, my trust away, but you can't take the love that's here to stay. You left me, but love stayed. You left me, but love stayed. In every breath these babies take, in every choice that I will make, you left me, but love stayed. I don't need your money or your name, I don't need to play your shadow game. I've got something you will never know, a love that stays and helps me grow. You left me, but love stayed. Oh yes it did. You left me, but love stayed. Stayed with me in the life I'm building from the ground, building up in the peace that I have finally found. I found my peace. You left me, but love stayed. Love stayed. You left me, but love stayed. Stayed with me. Love stayed. Love stayed with me.
But to understand how a desperate, heartbroken woman found the courage to sing those words in front of Manhattan's elite, we need to go back to the beginning. Back to the bathroom mirror where it all started, where Desiree Williams stared at a stranger and prepared to do the most humiliating thing of her life. The bathroom mirror reflected a woman Sophia Williams barely recognized. Her hands shook as she applied another coat of lipstick, trying to cover the fact that she'd been crying. 6 months pregnant with twins, wearing a black dress that barely fit anymore, she was about to do the most humiliating thing of her life. She was about to sing at Maxwell Thornton's wedding. The same Maxwell who had thrown her out of his life like garbage when she told him she was carrying his children. The same Maxwell who had destroyed her career and left her struggling to pay rent in her tiny Harlem apartment. Now here she was, backstage at his $1 million wedding, hired to entertain the guests who would never know she was carrying the groom's babies. Her phone buzzed. Another bill reminder. The electricity company didn't care that she was pregnant and heartbroken. They wanted their money, and singing at this wedding was the only way she could get it. The irony tasted bitter in her mouth. 5 minutes, miss, a wedding coordinator whispered through the door. Sophia closed her eyes and tried to steady her breathing. She thought back to 8 months ago when everything changed. She had been so excited to tell Maxwell about the pregnancy. They had been together for 2 years, working side by side at Thornton Industries. She had helped him build his event planning division from nothing, working late nights and weekends, believing they were building a future together. She remembered that awful night when she finally got the courage to tell him. She had cooked his favorite dinner and bought a little gift box with the ultrasound photos inside. When she told him there were 2 babies, his face had gone white as paper. "You did this on purpose," he had said, his voice cold as ice. "You're trying to trap me." The words still hurt like a fresh wound. She had tried to explain that it was an accident, that she never meant for this to happen. But Maxwell had already made up his mind. Within a week, she was fired from the company she had helped build. Her access cards were deactivated, her desk was cleared out, and security had escorted her from the building like she was a criminal. 2 minutes, miss. Sophia stood up and smoothed down her dress. Her belly was getting bigger every day, and soon she wouldn't be able to hide the pregnancy anymore. But tonight she needed this money. Her doctor visits were expensive, and she had to eat for 3 people now. She walked toward the stage entrance, her heels clicking on the marble floor. Through the curtain, she could see the lavish ballroom filled with Manhattan's elite. Crystal chandeliers hung from the ceiling, and white roses covered every surface. Maxwell had spared no expense for his perfect wedding to Claire Whitmore, the blonde socialite whose father owned half of the city's real estate. Sophia spotted Maxwell at the head table, laughing at something his new father-in-law was saying. He looked exactly the same, tall, dark hair perfectly styled, expensive suit tailored to perfection. But his smile looked fake, like he was playing a role in a movie. Claire sat beside him in her designer wedding dress, diamonds sparkling around her neck. She was everything Sophia wasn't: pale, thin, connected to the right families. She was the kind of woman Maxwell was supposed to marry, not a black girl from Harlem who sang in church choirs and dreamed of making it big. "You're on, miss." The coordinator pushed aside the curtain, and suddenly Sophia was walking onto the stage. The spotlight hit her eyes, and for a moment she couldn't see anything. Then the room came into focus and she saw Maxwell's face. For just a second, his mask slipped, and she saw something that might have been guilt flash across his features. She adjusted the microphone and looked out at the crowd of wealthy faces. These people had everything: money, power, respect. They had never wondered where their next meal was coming from or cried themselves to sleep because they couldn't afford prenatal vitamins. The piano started playing the song they had requested, some generic love ballad about eternal devotion. But as Sophia opened her mouth to sing, she realized she couldn't do it. She couldn't stand here and sing about love that lasts forever when the man who had promised to love her was sitting right there with another woman, pretending she had never existed. Instead, she began to sing something else entirely. A song that had been writing itself in her heart for months, born from pain and betrayal and the fierce love she already felt for her unborn babies. The pianist looked confused but followed along as Sophia's voice filled the room with raw emotion. This was it. This was her moment to tell the truth. 2 years earlier, Sophia had walked into Thornton Industries for her first day of work, clutching her portfolio and trying not to let her nerves show. She had graduated from college with a degree in business and a minor in music, and this job as an event coordinator was supposed to be her stepping stone to bigger things. Maxwell had been different then, or maybe she had just been too naive to see who he really was. He was the CEO's son, being groomed to take over the family business, but he seemed down to earth when he introduced himself in the elevator that first morning. "You must be the new hire," he had said, flashing that smile that would later break her heart. "I'm Maxwell. Welcome to the circus." She had laughed, and something had sparked between them right away. Over the next few weeks, they worked together on a big corporate event for one of the company's biggest clients. Maxwell had ideas, but Sophia had the creativity and organizational skills to make them happen. They made a good team. Their first kiss happened during a late night at the office, 3 months after she started working there. They had been going over seating charts for a charity gala when Maxwell had looked up from his laptop and said, "You know, you're pretty amazing." Before she knew it, they were dating. It had to be secret at first because of company policy, but Maxwell promised that once he got promoted to vice president, they could go public. They would get married, maybe start a family, build something beautiful together. Sophia threw herself into her work with even more passion, knowing she was helping to build their future. She came up with innovative event themes, negotiated better deals with vendors, and turned the event planning department into one of the most profitable divisions in the company. Maxwell took credit for most of her ideas, but she didn't mind. They were a team. The relationship wasn't perfect. Maxwell could be demanding and controlling, especially when he was stressed about work. He never wanted to meet her friends or family, always saying he preferred to keep their relationship private. When she suggested they spend holidays together, he would find excuses to visit his family's estate in the Hamptons instead. But there were good times too. Maxwell could be charming and generous when he wanted to be. He would surprise her with expensive gifts and take her to fancy restaurants where she felt out of place but tried to fit in for his sake. He would tell her she was different from other women, that she understood him in a way no one else did. Looking back now, Sophia could see all the red flags she had ignored. The way Maxwell never introduced her to his friends or family. How he would get angry if she talked about their future together. The fact that he never said he loved her, even after 2 years together. But at the time, she had been so grateful to be chosen by someone like him that she had made excuses for everything. She told herself that he was just private, that he was protecting their relationship from office gossip. She believed him when he said they had to wait for the right time to go public. The night she found out she was pregnant, Sophia had been scared but also secretly excited. She had always wanted children, and even though this wasn't planned, she thought maybe it was a sign that their relationship was ready to move to the next level. She had spent hours planning how to tell Maxwell. She bought a little wooden box and put the ultrasound photos inside with a note that said, "Our little miracles are coming." When the doctor told her there were 2 babies, she had cried happy tears, imagining Maxwell's reaction. The dinner had been perfect. She had made his favorite pasta dish and bought an expensive bottle of wine that she couldn't drink. She had waited until after dessert to give him the box, her hands shaking with excitement and nerves. Maxwell had opened it slowly, his face unreadable as he looked at the ultrasound photos. The silence stretched on forever before he finally spoke. "How could you let this happen?" he had asked, his voice deadly quiet. "It wasn't on purpose," Sophia had said, reaching for his hand. "But Maxwell, we're having twins. Isn't that amazing?" That's when his mask had completely fallen away. He had stood up so fast that his chair fell over, his face twisted with anger and disgust. "You think I'm going to throw away my entire future for some accident?" he had said. "My family has plans for me, Sophia. Real plans. Not playing house with some girl from the projects." The words had hit her like physical blows. She had never told him she grew up in public housing, but somehow he had found out and was using it against her. "I'm not trying to trap you," she had whispered, tears starting to fall. "I just thought you should know." "Well, now I know," Maxwell had said, straightening his tie. "And I know what I have to do." He had left that night and never came back. Within days, Sophia found herself locked out of her own projects at work. Her ideas were reassigned to other people, and her access to important meetings was revoked. When she tried to talk to Maxwell, his assistant would say he was too busy to see her. The firing came a week later. Human Resources called it restructuring, but Sophia knew the truth. Maxwell was erasing her from his life, making sure there was no evidence that they had ever been together. Now, standing on the stage at his wedding, Sophia remembered every moment of pain and betrayal. But she also remembered the strength she had found in the months since. She had learned to survive on her own, to fight for herself and her babies. Maxwell had tried to destroy her, but she was still standing. And tonight, everyone would know exactly who he really was. After losing her job at Thornton Industries, Sophia had exactly $2,000 in her savings account and no idea how she was going to survive. The rent on her studio apartment was $1,500 a month, and with doctor visits and prenatal vitamins, the money disappeared faster than water through a broken dam. She applied for job after job, but every time she got close to being hired, something would go wrong. References would suddenly become unreachable, or the hiring manager would get a mysterious phone call that changed their mind. It took her weeks to realize that Maxwell was sabotaging her behind the scenes, using his family's connections to make sure she stayed unemployed. The pregnancy was getting harder to hide. At 4 months, she could still wear loose clothes and fool people during quick interviews, but the morning sickness was brutal. She would have to excuse herself to throw up, and more than once she fainted during a job interview from exhaustion and stress. Her friends tried to help, but most of them were struggling too. Her best friend Rita let her crash on her couch for a few nights when the electricity got shut off, but Rita had 3 kids of her own and couldn't afford to support another person long term. Sophia's mother lived in a nursing home in New Jersey, and her medical bills ate up most of her Social Security check. Sophia visited her every Sunday, but she couldn't bring herself to tell her mother about the pregnancy. Her mom had worked 2 jobs to put Sophia through college, and she was so proud of her daughter's success at the corporate job. How could Sophia explain that it was all gone? The lowest point came when Sophia found herself at a food bank, standing in line with other desperate people, trying not to cry as she filled out the paperwork. The volunteer was kind but overworked, and Sophia felt invisible as she accepted the box of canned goods and pasta. That night, she sat in her empty apartment. The furniture had been repossessed the week before and ate cold soup from the can while doing math on the back of an envelope. Even if she found a job tomorrow, she wouldn't make enough money to pay for childcare for twins. The medical bills from the pregnancy were already piling up, and she hadn't even thought about what would happen after the babies were born. She had tried calling Maxwell once, swallowing her pride and leaving a voicemail asking for help with medical expenses. He never called back, but 2 days later she received a legal letter from his family's law firm, warning her not to contact him again and demanding a DNA test to prove he was the father. The letter made her so angry she threw it across the room. Maxwell knew he was the father. She had never been with anyone else during their relationship. But he was going to make her prove it, drag her through court, and probably find a way to avoid paying child support anyway. That's when Sophia decided she didn't want anything from him. She would rather struggle on her own than give him the satisfaction of controlling her life. She threw away his phone number and blocked him on social media. If he wanted to pretend she didn't exist, she would do the same to him. But making that decision didn't solve her immediate problems. She was 6 months pregnant and running out of options fast. She had started singing at a coffee shop on weekends, but the pay was terrible and the late nights were exhausting. The owner felt sorry for her and sometimes let her take home leftover pastries, but it wasn't enough to live on. That's when she got the phone call that changed everything. "Miss Williams? This is Catherine from Elite Events Planning. We're organizing a high-profile wedding next month, and we're looking for a vocalist for the reception. Your name came up as someone with experience in corporate events." Sophia had been confused at first. She hadn't worked in corporate events since losing her job, and she couldn't imagine who would have recommended her. But the woman on the phone was offering good money, enough to pay her rent for 3 months if she was careful. "The wedding is for Maxwell Thornton and Claire Whitmore," Catherine had continued. "I understand you used to work for the Thornton Company, so you're familiar with their standards." Sophia had almost dropped the phone. Maxwell was getting married, and somehow his wedding planner had found her name and was offering her a job. It was too much of a coincidence to be accidental. "I don't think that's a good idea," Sophia had said, her voice shaking. "The pay is $5,000 for one evening," Catherine had said quickly. "Plus tips from the guests. Mr. Thornton specifically requested someone with your background." $5,000. It was more money than Sophia had seen in months. It would cover her medical bills, her rent, and maybe even let her buy some baby furniture. But the price was her dignity. She had hung up the phone and spent the next 3 days thinking about it. She walked around her neighborhood, looking at other pregnant women pushing strollers and wondering if she would ever be able to give her babies the life they deserved. She thought about her mother, who had sacrificed everything to give Sophia opportunities. She thought about the babies growing inside her, depending on her to figure out how to survive. Finally, she called Catherine back. "I'll do it," she had said. "But I have some conditions." The wedding was in 2 weeks. Sophia spent that time trying to prepare herself mentally for seeing Maxwell again. She practiced the songs they had requested, all generic love ballads that made her sick to her stomach. She bought a dress that would hide her pregnancy as much as possible, even though she could barely afford it. The night before the wedding, she lay in bed staring at the ceiling, one hand on her belly where the babies were kicking. They seemed to sense her anxiety, moving around more than usual. "I'm doing this for you," she whispered to them. "I'm going to sing at your father's wedding so I can take care of you. But after this, we're done with him forever." She had no idea that this humiliating job would turn out to be the beginning of her new life. The Whitmore estate in the Hamptons looked like something from a fairy tale, all rolling lawns and white columns overlooking the ocean. Sophia arrived in a borrowed car, feeling completely out of place as she drove up the circular driveway past luxury vehicles that cost more than most people's houses. The wedding coordinator, Catherine, met her at the service entrance. She was a thin woman with perfectly styled blonde hair and the kind of smile that never reached her eyes. "You must be Sophia," she said, looking her up and down. "I hope you're feeling well enough to perform tonight." It was a polite way of commenting on the pregnancy, which was becoming harder to hide even with the loose-fitting black dress Sophia had chosen. She was 7 months along now, and the twins were making their presence known. "I'll be fine," Sophia said, following Catherine through a maze of hallways filled with catering staff and florists putting finishing touches on elaborate arrangements. The bride specifically requested that all service staff use the back entrances and stay out of sight until showtime, Catherine said over her shoulder. "Mrs. Whitmore is very particular about the guest experience." Sophia bit her tongue. She had helped plan dozens of events when she worked for Maxwell, and she knew the difference between attention to detail and simple snobbery. This was definitely the latter. They reached a small room that had been set up as a dressing area for the evening's performers. There was a string quartet setting up their instruments and a jazz pianist who would be playing during dinner. Sophia was the only vocalist, scheduled to perform during the reception after the first dance. "You'll go on at 9:30, Catherine said, handing her a playlist. 3 songs, no more than 15 minutes total. The bride has requested that you keep the mood romantic and avoid anything too urban." The way she said urban made Sophia's stomach turn. She looked at the playlist, generic love songs that could have been performed by anyone. Nothing that would challenge the guests or make them think too hard. "I understand," Sophia said, though she was already thinking about the song she had been writing in her head for months. The one that told the real story of love and betrayal. Catherine left her alone to get ready, and Sophia spent the next hour listening to the sounds of the wedding preparation through the thin walls. She could hear the string quartet playing classical music as guests arrived, the clink of champagne glasses, and the gentle murmur of conversation from people who had never worried about paying rent or buying groceries. At 8 o'clock, she heard the ceremony begin. The wedding march played, and she imagined Maxwell standing at the altar in his expensive tuxedo, watching his perfect bride walk down the aisle. Claire Whitmore was everything a society wife should be: beautiful, connected, and completely unthreatening to the established order. Sophia touched her belly, feeling the babies move inside her. These were Maxwell's children too, but he would never acknowledge them. They would grow up without a father and he would pretend they didn't exist. The ceremony lasted about 30 minutes. Afterwards, she could hear the guests moving to the ballroom for cocktails and dinner. The jazz pianist started playing background music, and the sound of laughter and conversation grew louder. At 9 o'clock, Catherine came back to check on her. "The bride would like to meet you briefly before you perform," she said. "Just to make sure you understand the tone she's going for." They walked through more hallways until they reached a small sitting room where Claire was touching up her makeup. Up close, she was even more beautiful than in the society page photos Sophia had seen. Her wedding dress probably cost more than Sophia made in a year when she was working. "You're the singer," Claire said, barely glancing up from her compact mirror. "I want to make sure you understand that this is a classy affair. Nothing too soulful or, you know." Again with the coded language. Sophia felt her jaw tighten, but she kept her voice steady. "I understand what you're looking for," she said. "Good." Claire snapped her compact shut and stood up. "This is the most important day of my life, and I won't have it ruined by someone who doesn't understand their place." The words hit Sophia like a slap. She thought about all the times Maxwell had said similar things, always making her feel like she should be grateful for his attention, like she was lucky to be included in his world. "I'll do my best," Sophia said through gritted teeth. 20 minutes later, she was standing in the wings of the ballroom, watching Maxwell and Claire have their first dance. They looked perfect together, spinning around the dance floor while their guests watched and applauded. Maxwell's parents beamed with pride, and Claire's father raised his champagne glass in a toast. This was the life Maxwell had chosen: safe, predictable, approved by all the right people. Sophia was just a messy complication he had erased from his story. But as she watched him smile and laugh with his new wife, she realized something important. She wasn't angry anymore. She was free. Maxwell had chosen his prison, surrounded by people who would never really know him, married to a woman who saw him as a status symbol. But Sophia had been given something much more valuable: the chance to build a real life based on truth instead of appearances. The first dance ended and Catherine appeared at her elbow. "You're on," she whispered. Sophia walked onto the stage, adjusted the microphone, and looked out at the sea of faces. She found Maxwell in the crowd, sitting at the head table with his arm around his new wife. For just a moment, their eyes met across the room. Then she began to sing and everything changed. The spotlight was warm on Sophia's face as she stood at the microphone, looking out at the room full of Manhattan's elite. The piano began the introduction to the first song on the playlist, a sappy ballad about eternal love that made her stomach turn. But as she opened her mouth to sing, something inside her rebelled. She couldn't do it. She couldn't stand here, pregnant with Maxwell's children, and lie about love lasting forever. Not when he was sitting right there with another woman, pretending she had never existed. Instead of the requested song, Sophia began to sing something completely different. The melody came straight from her heart, words she had been writing in her head during all those sleepless nights when she worried about how she would take care of her babies. "You said you loved me when the lights were low, whispered promises you'd never show, but when the morning came and truth broke through, I found out who you really were and what you'd do." The pianist looked confused but followed her lead, his fingers finding the chord progression by ear. The room grew quiet as people realized this wasn't the romantic background music they were expecting. Maxwell's face had gone pale. He was staring at her with a mixture of shock and fury, his hand gripping his champagne glass so tight his knuckles were white. Claire looked confused, glancing between her new husband and the singer on stage. But Sophia wasn't singing for them anymore. She was singing for herself, for her babies, for every woman who had ever been thrown away by a man who couldn't handle the truth. You left me broken, thought I'd disappear, but I'm still standing though you're not here. You took my job, my dreams, my trust away, but you can't take the love that's here to stay. Her voice cracked on the word, love, and she had to pause for a moment to steady herself. She put her hand on her belly, feeling the babies moving inside her, and found her strength again. These little hearts are beating strong and true, they'll never know the pain you put me through. I'll teach them love is more than just a word, it's showing up when promises are heard. The room was completely silent now except for her voice and the piano. Some of the guests were looking uncomfortable, shifting in their seats and glancing at Maxwell to see how he was reacting. Others were leaning forward, caught up in the raw emotion of the performance. Claire had figured out that something was wrong. She was whispering urgently to Maxwell, but he couldn't take his eyes off Sophia. His perfect facade was cracking and everyone could see it. Sophia built to the chorus, her voice growing stronger with each word. You left me but love stayed, you left me but love stayed, in every breath these babies take, in every choice that I will make, you left me but love stayed. An older woman at one of the front tables was crying, dabbing at her eyes with her napkin. A few other guests were nodding along, and Sophia could see recognition in their faces. They understood that this wasn't just a song, it was a confession, a testimony, a declaration of independence. I don't need your money or your name, I don't need to play your shallow game, I've got something you will never know, a love that stays and helps me grow. Maxwell stood up abruptly, his chair scraping against the floor. All eyes turned to him as he started to walk toward the stage, his face red with anger and embarrassment. But Sophia didn't stop singing. If anything, his reaction gave her more power. You can try to silence me, pretend I'm not here, but the truth has a way of becoming clear. These babies are proof of what we shared, even if you act like you never cared. Claire was on her feet now too, her perfect wedding dress trailing behind her as she followed her husband. The wedding coordinator was frantically trying to figure out how to handle the situation, but there was no protocol for this kind of chaos. Sophia sang the final chorus with everything she had, pouring all her pain and strength and hope into the words. You left me but love stayed, you left me but love stayed, in the life I'm building from the ground, in the peace that I have finally found, you left me but love stayed, you left me but love stayed. The last note hung in the air for a long moment before the piano finally stopped. The room was dead quiet, everyone waiting to see what would happen next. Maxwell had reached the edge of the stage, his face twisted with rage. Get her out of here, he hissed to the coordinator. This is not what we paid for. But before anyone could move, something unexpected happened. One person in the back of the room started clapping. Then another. Then another. Soon, half the room was applauding, some of them getting to their feet in a standing ovation. Sophia looked out at the crowd and saw something she hadn't expected: respect. These wealthy, powerful people were applauding her courage, her truth, her refusal to be silenced. Claire was tugging on Maxwell's arm, trying to get him to come back to their table. People are staring, she whispered urgently. You're making a scene. But Maxwell was beyond caring about appearances. He pointed at Sophia with a shaking finger. You have no right, he said, his voice carrying across the room. No right to come here and ruin my wedding with your lies. The applause stopped. Every person in the room was watching this confrontation between the groom and the singer. Sophia looked down at Maxwell from the stage, feeling a strange sense of calm wash over her. I'm not here to ruin anything, she said into the microphone, her voice steady and clear. I'm here to sing. And I sang my truth. She stepped away from the microphone, walking off the stage with her head held high. She had said what she needed to say and now she was done. Behind her, she could hear the room erupting in whispers and shocked conversations. Claire was crying, her perfect makeup running down her cheeks. Maxwell was standing alone in the middle of the dance floor, his wedding in ruins around him. But Sophia didn't look back. She walked straight out of the ballroom, through the maze of hallways and out into the cool night air. For the first time in months she felt like she could breathe. Sophia woke up the next morning to her phone buzzing non-stop. Still groggy from the emotional exhaustion of the night before, she reached for it and saw dozens of notifications, missed calls, text messages, and social media alerts she didn't understand. The first text was from her friend Rita. Girl, you need to check the internet right now. You're famous. Confused, Sophia opened her social media app and gasped. There were hundreds of messages from strangers, and videos tagged with her name. Someone at the wedding had recorded her performance and posted it online. The video already had over 1 million views. The comments were overwhelming. Most were supportive, praising her courage and talent. "This woman is a queen," one person wrote. "She told her truth and walked away with her dignity intact." Another said, "I'm crying at my desk. This is what real strength looks like." But there were negative comments too. Some people called her unprofessional, saying she had ruined someone's special day. Others made cruel jokes about her pregnancy or her appearance. Sophia tried not to read those, but they still hurt. Her phone rang. It was a number she didn't recognize. "Is this Sophia Williams?" a woman's voice asked. "This is Sarah Martinez from Channel 7 News. We'd like to interview you about what happened at the Thornton wedding last night." Sophia hung up, her hands shaking. More calls came in other news stations, bloggers, even a few radio shows. She turned off her phone and tried to process what was happening. By afternoon, she couldn't ignore it anymore. The video had spread to every major social media platform, and news outlets were picking up the story. "Singer exposes groom at his own wedding," read one headline. "Pregnant woman's powerful performance goes viral," said another. Rita came over with groceries and filled Sophia in on everything. She was too overwhelmed to read herself. "They're calling you brave," Rita said, showing her articles on her phone. "Women are sharing their own stories about men who abandoned them when they got pregnant. You started something big, girl." But it wasn't just individual women responding. Organizations were reaching out too. A women's shelter in Brooklyn wanted her to perform at their fundraising gala. A pregnancy resource center in Queens asked if she would speak at their next event. There were offers from record labels, booking agents, and talent managers. The most surprising call came from Dr. Angela Foster, a prominent women's rights activist who had seen the video. "What you did took incredible courage," Dr. Foster said when Sophia finally answered her phone. "I'm organizing a conference next month about women's economic empowerment. Would you consider being one of our keynote speakers?" "I'm not a public speaker," Sophia said. "I'm just a singer who got tired of being treated badly." "That's exactly what makes you perfect for this," Dr. Foster replied. "You've lived this experience. You know what it's like to have your career destroyed by a powerful man. Your story could help other women who are going through the same thing." Sophia thought about it for a moment. A few months ago, she had been invisible, struggling to survive and believing she had no value. Now people were calling her brave and asking for her advice. "I'll think about it," she said. Over the next few days, the media attention continued to grow. Entertainment blogs picked up the story, and suddenly everyone wanted to know more about the woman who had stood up to her powerful ex-boyfriend. Someone had leaked details about Maxwell's business practices and his family's wealth, painting a picture of a spoiled rich man who thought he could treat people however he wanted. Maxwell himself had gone silent. His social media accounts were deactivated, and his company's public relations team was working overtime to control the damage. There were rumors that his new wife was already talking to divorce lawyers, humiliated by the public spectacle. But Sophia wasn't focused on Maxwell's downfall. She was thinking about her future and the opportunities that were suddenly opening up. A small record label called Harmony Records had offered her a contract to record an album of original songs. The advance wasn't huge, but it was enough to pay her medical bills and rent for the next year. "Think about it," the label executive had said during their phone call. "An album about single motherhood, about finding strength after betrayal. There are millions of women who would relate to that story." Sophia was also getting requests to perform at events across the country. Women's organizations, charity fundraisers, even some corporate events that wanted to show their support for working mothers. The pay was good, and she could schedule everything around her pregnancy and the baby's needs. For the first time since losing her job, Sophia felt like she had control over her life again. She wasn't just surviving anymore, she was building something new. A week after the wedding, she got an unexpected visitor. Her mother's nurse called to say that someone had paid for a private room upgrade and hired additional care staff. When Sophia asked who had done it, the nurse said it was an anonymous donation from someone who had seen her story on the news. That afternoon, Sophia sat with her mother in the sunny new room, finally ready to tell her about the pregnancy. "You're going to be a grandmother," she said, taking her mother's hand. "Twins." Her mother smiled, tears in her eyes. "I already know, baby. I saw you on the news. You made me so proud." "I'm sorry I didn't tell you sooner," Sophia said. "Everything happened so fast and I was scared." "You don't need to be scared anymore," her mother said. "You showed the whole world what you're made of." Those babies are lucky to have you as their mama. That night, Sophia made her decision. She called Dr. Foster back and agreed to speak at the conference. She signed the record deal with Harmony Records. She started planning a tour of performances at women's events across the country. But most importantly, she started writing new songs. Not just about heartbreak and betrayal, but about hope and resilience and the love that stays even when people leave. 3 months after the wedding that changed her life, Sophia stood backstage at the Women's Economic Empowerment Conference in Chicago, 8 months pregnant and nervous about her first major speaking engagement. Her belly was so big now that she had to adjust the microphone stand, and the babies were active, kicking and moving around as if they could sense her excitement. Dr. Angela Foster introduced her to thunderous applause. "Our next speaker showed us all what courage looks like," she said. "Please welcome singer and advocate Sophia Williams." Walking onto the stage, Sophia saw an audience of over 1,000 women from all walks of life. Business executives sat next to single mothers, college students next to retirees. They were all here to learn about financial independence and professional success, but Sophia's story had resonated with something deeper. 6 months ago, I was living in a studio apartment with no furniture, eating soup from a can and wondering how I was going to take care of my babies, she began. I thought my life was over. I thought I had lost everything that mattered. She told her story simply, without drama or self-pity. How she had built Maxwell's event planning division from nothing, only to be erased from the company when she got pregnant. How she had struggled to find work and pay bills while dealing with morning sickness and mounting medical expenses. I almost didn't take that job singing at his wedding, she admitted. My pride was already broken and I didn't want to humiliate myself further. But I needed the money and I thought I could just get through it and move on. The audience was completely quiet, hanging on every word. But when I got up there and saw him pretending to be happy, pretending I had never existed, something inside me said, enough. I couldn't sing about fairy tale love when I was carrying his children and he had thrown me away like garbage. She talked about the aftermath, the viral video, the media attention, the opportunities that had come from telling her truth. But also the challenges of being pregnant and dealing with sudden fame, the cruel comments from strangers, the exhaustion of constant interviews and appearances. The hardest part wasn't the betrayal, she said. It was learning to believe in myself again. For 2 years, I had let someone else define my worth. I had made myself smaller so he could feel bigger. Breaking free from that mindset was harder than anything else. When she finished speaking, the standing ovation lasted for 5 minutes. Women were crying, hugging each other, and shouting encouragement. During the question and answer session, dozens of women shared their own stories of workplace discrimination, pregnancy-related job loss, and financial abuse by partners. After the conference, Sophia was approached by a woman who had been sitting in the front row. She was elegantly dressed but had a warm, approachable smile. "I'm Dr. Rebecca Martinez," she introduced herself. "I run a nonprofit that provides legal services to women facing pregnancy discrimination. I'd love to talk to you about partnering with us on some initiatives." They talked for an hour about the problems facing pregnant women in the workplace and how Sophia's platform could help raise awareness. Dr. Martinez was impressive, passionate about the cause but also practical about solutions. "There's someone I'd like you to meet," Dr. Martinez said as they were wrapping up. "My colleague Dr. Elijah Green is here for the medical panel tomorrow. He's a pediatrician who works with a lot of single mothers. I think you two would have a lot to talk about." The next day, Sophia attended the panel on maternal and child health, curious to meet this doctor who supposedly shared her concerns. Dr. Elijah Green was not what she expected. He was tall and soft-spoken, with kind eyes and an easy smile. When he talked about his work with low-income families, his passion was obvious but not overwhelming. After the panel, Dr. Martinez introduced them at the conference reception. Dr. Green, call me Elijah, was genuinely interested in Sophia's story, but not in the way that made her feel like a curiosity or a cause to champion. "I saw your video when it first went viral," he said. "I was working a night shift at the hospital and one of the nurses showed it to me. Your voice is incredible, but what really struck me was your dignity. You didn't try to destroy him or make a scene. You just told your truth and walked away." They talked about music, about the challenges of working with vulnerable populations, about their hopes for their children, his 8-year-old daughter from his first marriage, and her twins who would be born soon. "My wife died in a car accident 3 years ago," Elijah said quietly. "Lucy, that's my daughter, she's been asking when we're going to have more family. I keep telling her that life doesn't always work out the way we plan." There was something about his honesty that made Sophia comfortable. He wasn't trying to impress her or fix her problems. He was just sharing his own experience with loss and rebuilding. They exchanged numbers, and over the next few weeks they started texting occasionally. Nothing romantic, just friendly conversations about their work, their children, the books they were reading. Elijah would send her articles about child development, and she would share updates about her album recording sessions. When Sophia went into early labor at 36 weeks, alone in her apartment at 2 in the morning, Elijah was one of the first people she called. He met her at the hospital and stayed with her through the long night, not as a doctor but as a friend who understood what it felt like to face scary moments alone. The twins, a boy and a girl she named Hope and Justice, were small but healthy. As Sophia held them for the first time, she felt a completeness she had never experienced before. These were her babies, her family, her future. Maxwell's rejection had hurt, but it had also freed her to build something real and lasting. Elijah visited her in the hospital the next day, bringing flowers and a children's book about strong mothers. "Lucy picked this out," he said. "She's excited to meet them when you're ready." Looking at this gentle man who had shown up for her without being asked, Sophia felt something she hadn't felt in a long time: hope for love that might actually stay. The first few weeks with the twins were overwhelming in ways Sophia hadn't expected. Hope was a calm baby who slept well and ate regularly, but Justice was colicky and cried for hours at a time. Sophia found herself walking the floors of her apartment at 3 in the morning, bouncing a screaming baby while trying not to wake the neighbors. Elijah had offered to help, but Sophia was hesitant to accept. She had learned to be independent out of necessity, and the idea of depending on someone else, especially a man, felt dangerous. What if he decided she was too much trouble? What if he disappeared like Maxwell had? But Elijah was persistent in the gentlest way possible. He would text her articles about colic and infant sleep patterns. He brought over groceries without being asked, always including her favorite ice cream and healthy snacks she could eat one-handed while nursing. When she mentioned that she was worried about finding a good pediatrician, he gave her a list of his most trusted colleagues who accepted her insurance. "I'm not trying to take over," he said one evening when she thanked him for the 5th time that week. "I just remember how hard it was when Lucy was born. My wife was in the hospital for complications, and I was alone with a newborn for 2 weeks. I would have given anything for someone to bring me a sandwich or hold the baby while I took a shower." That's when Sophia realized that Elijah's help came from his own experience with single parenting, not from pity or romantic interest. He understood what she needed because he had needed the same things. Slowly she started accepting his offers. When Justice had a particularly bad night and Sophia hadn't slept in 36 hours, she let Elijah come over and hold the baby while she napped for 2 hours. When she had to go to a recording session for her album, he watched both twins so she didn't have to hire a babysitter she couldn't afford. The twins were 3 months old when Maxwell made his first attempt to contact her. The letter came from his lawyer, demanding a DNA test and claiming he wanted to establish paternity and discuss custody arrangements. Sophia laughed bitterly as she read it. Maxwell had ignored her completely during her pregnancy, never once asking about her health or the baby's well-being. Now that she was successful in getting positive media attention, suddenly he wanted to be a father. She called the lawyer who had been handling her record deal and entertainment contracts. "What are my options?" she asked. "Legally, he has the right to request a paternity test," the lawyer explained. "But given the circumstances, the fact that he abandoned you during pregnancy and made no attempt to provide support, a court would be unlikely to grant him significant custody or visitation rights, especially with newborns." "I don't want his money," Sophia said. "I just want him to leave us alone." "The DNA test might actually work in your favor," the lawyer suggested. "Once paternity is established, you can request child support going back to the beginning of the pregnancy. Medical bills, lost wages, prenatal care, it could be a substantial amount." Sophia thought about it for a few days. Part of her wanted to fight Maxwell out of pure spite, to make him pay for all the pain he had caused. But another part of her just wanted to move forward with her life. She was discussing it with Elijah over dinner one evening. He had started coming over twice a week to cook for her while she fed the babies when Justice started crying in his high chair. "I've got him," Elijah said automatically, lifting the baby and beginning the gentle bouncing motion that usually calmed him down. Justice settled immediately, making his little cooing sounds and grabbing at Elijah's stethoscope. "He likes you," Sophia said, watching them together. "Kids can tell when someone genuinely cares about them," Elijah replied. "These babies have never known anything but love from you. They're lucky." That's when it hit her. Maxwell could demand DNA tests and custody hearings, but he would never be their real father. He had missed their first smiles, their first laughs, the way Hope grabbed her own feet and Justice got hiccups after every feeding. Elijah knew these things because he had been there, showing up day after day without being asked. I'm going to agree to the DNA test, she decided. But I'm also going to request full back support and ask for supervised visitation only. If he wants to be a father, he can prove it by showing up consistently and putting their needs first. Maxwell's lawyer tried to negotiate, but Sophia's position was firm. The DNA test confirmed what everyone already knew: Maxwell was the biological father. But when the judge heard the full story, including Maxwell's abandonment during pregnancy and his pattern of workplace retaliation, the custody arrangement was minimal. One supervised visit per month, with the option to increase if Maxwell demonstrated consistent involvement and financial support. Maxwell showed up for exactly 2 visits before disappearing again. The babies didn't know who he was, and he seemed uncomfortable and awkward holding them. During the second visit, Justice spit up on Maxwell's expensive suit, and he handed the baby back to Sophia like he was radioactive. This isn't working, Maxwell said, his mask of concern slipping. They don't even know me. That's because you haven't tried to know them, Sophia replied calmly. Being a parent isn't about biology. It's about showing up. After that, Maxwell's lawyer sent a letter saying his client was reassessing his availability for future visits. Sophia wasn't surprised. Maxwell had wanted the image of being a father without any of the actual responsibility. But she was surprised by how little she cared. 6 months earlier, his rejection would have devastated her. Now she felt mostly relieved. The twins deserved better than a part-time father who saw them as an obligation. That night, she and Elijah were giving the babies their bedtime bottles when Hope grabbed Elijah's finger and held on tight, looking up at him with her big brown eyes. She's got a strong grip, he said softly. Just like her mama. For the first time since Maxwell had walked out of her life, Sophia allowed herself to imagine what it might be like to build a family with someone who actually wanted to be there. 6 months after the twins were born, Sophia's life had settled into a rhythm she never could have imagined. Her album Love Stays had been released to critical acclaim and modest commercial success. She wasn't making pop star money, but the steady income from sales, streaming, and live performances was enough to support her small family comfortably. More importantly, she felt fulfilled in a way she never had during her corporate days. The songs on her album told stories about single motherhood, about finding strength after betrayal, about the different kinds of love that sustain us. Women wrote to her from all over the country, sharing their own stories and thanking her for giving voice to experiences that often went unheard. Elijah had become a constant presence in their lives, but Sophia was still cautious about defining their relationship. He was wonderful with the twins, patient with Justice's crying spells, and delighted by Hope's early attempts at rolling over. His daughter Lucy, now 9, had become like a big sister to the babies, always wanting to help with feedings and diaper changes. But Sophia had been hurt so deeply by Maxwell's betrayal that she was afraid to trust her own judgment about men. What if she was making the same mistake again? What if Elijah's kindness was just an act, and he would disappear as soon as things got difficult? The test came on a Tuesday evening in March. Sophia had been battling a stomach virus for 2 days, barely able to keep food down, when both twins came down with high fevers. Hope, usually the calmer baby, was screaming inconsolably, and Justice's temperature spiked to 103 degrees. Sophia called Elijah in a panic. I think I need to take them to the emergency room, she said, her voice shaking. But I can barely stand up, and I don't know how I'm going to handle both of them by myself. I'm on my way, Elijah said without hesitation. Don't try to drive. I'll be there in 15 minutes. He arrived with Lucy in tow. She had been staying with him for the week and immediately took charge of the situation. While Sophia gathered the diaper bag and insurance cards, Elijah checked the baby's temperatures and symptoms with practiced efficiency. Justice's fever is concerning, he said calmly. We should definitely get them checked out. Lucy, can you help Miss Sophia get her coat while I get the car seats? At the hospital, Elijah's presence made all the difference. He knew which doctors to ask for, how to navigate the pediatric emergency room, and most importantly, how to keep Sophia calm while they waited for test results. Fevers in babies this young can be scary, he said, sitting beside her in the uncomfortable waiting room chairs. But they're usually not as serious as they seem. Their little bodies are just learning how to fight off infections. Lucy had fallen asleep across 3 chairs, exhausted from the late-night drama. Sophia watched Elijah adjust his jacket over the little girl's shoulders, his movements automatic and caring. You should go home, Sophia said quietly. You both have school and work tomorrow. I can handle this. Elijah looked at her with surprise. I'm not leaving you here alone with sick babies at 2 in the morning. Lucy can sleep in the car if she needs to, but we're staying until we know everyone's okay. It was such a simple statement, but it hit Sophia with unexpected force. Maxwell would have found an excuse to leave by now, claiming he had important meetings or couldn't afford to miss work. But Elijah was treating her children's crisis like his own family emergency. The tests came back normal, just a minor viral infection that would run its course in a few days. The babies' fevers had already started to break, and they were sleeping peacefully in their carriers. But the experience had shifted something fundamental in Sophia's understanding of what partnership could look like. As they drove home in the early morning hours, Lucy asleep in the back seat and the twins finally calm, Sophia found herself really looking at Elijah for the first time. Not as a helpful friend or a potential threat, but as a man who had chosen to show up for her family again and again, without being asked and without expecting anything in return. "Thank you," she said softly. "For everything. Not just tonight but for the past few months. I don't know how I would have managed without you." "You would have managed just fine," Elijah replied, keeping his eyes on the road. "You're one of the strongest people I've ever met. But you don't have to manage everything alone." They pulled up outside Sophia's building, and Elijah helped her carry the sleeping babies upstairs. As they stood in her living room, both exhausted from the long night, Sophia felt a moment of clarity. "Elijah," she said, then stopped, not sure how to put her feelings into words. He waited patiently, the way he always did, giving her space to figure out what she wanted to say. "I've been scared," she admitted finally. "Scared to trust anyone again, scared to let you get too close. But tonight, watching you with my kids, seeing how you dropped everything to help us, I realized I've been protecting myself from exactly what I actually want." Elijah stepped closer, his expression gentle but serious. "What do you want, Sophia?" "I want someone who shows up," she said. "Someone who sees my children as a blessing, not a burden. Someone who understands that love isn't just a feeling, it's a choice you make every day." "I want that too," Elijah said quietly. "I've wanted it since the first day we met." When he kissed her, it was nothing like the passionate, desperate kisses she had shared with Maxwell. It was gentle and sure, full of promise rather than demand. It felt like coming home. Later, after Elijah had gone home to get Lucy ready for school, Sophia sat in her quiet apartment holding her sleeping babies. For the first time since Maxwell had walked out of her life, she allowed herself to believe that maybe, just maybe, she deserved the kind of love that really did stay. 1 year later, Sophia stood backstage at the grand ballroom of the Marriott, preparing for the most important performance of her career. The annual Women's Empowerment Gala was sold out, with over 1,500 attendees who had paid to support organizations that helped single mothers and families in crisis. But this performance was different from all the others. This time she wasn't singing alone. The twins, now 18 months old, were backstage with Elijah and Lucy. Hope was trying to eat her own shoe while Justice babbled happily at his reflection in Lucy's phone screen. They were perfect, healthy, and completely unaware that their mama was about to sing the song that had changed all their lives. 5 minutes, Miss Williams, the stage manager called. Sophia adjusted her dress, a deep blue gown that made her feel elegant and powerful, and checked her makeup one last time. Her hands weren't shaking anymore. She had performed You Left Me But Love Stayed dozens of times over the past year at conferences and concerts and charity events. But tonight felt different because tonight she was singing it with joy instead of pain. Elijah appeared at her side, looking handsome in his black tuxedo. They had been engaged for 3 months now, planning a small wedding for the following spring. Nothing fancy or expensive, just family and friends celebrating the kind of love that was built on friendship, respect, and showing up for each other every day. "The babies are settled with the babysitter," he said, straightening her necklace with gentle fingers. "Lucy's in the front row with my parents, and your mom's nurse says she's watching the live stream from her room." Sophia's mother had been so proud when she heard about the engagement. "That man loves you the right way," she had said during their last visit. "He sees you for who you really are." "How do you feel?" Elijah asked, studying her face. "Ready," Sophia said, and she meant it. "For the first time in my life, I feel completely ready." The introduction began, and Sophia walked onto the stage to thunderous applause. The audience was on their feet before she even reached the microphone, and she had to wait for the noise to die down before she could speak. "A year and a half ago, I sang this song for the first time at a wedding," she began. "I was pregnant, broke, and desperate. I thought my life was over. I thought I had lost everything that mattered." She paused, looking out at the sea of faces. In the front row, she could see Lucy beaming with pride, flanked by Elijah's parents who had welcomed her and the twins into their family without hesitation. "I was wrong," she continued. I hadn't lost everything. I had lost the things that were never really mine: a man who didn't value me, a job that treated me as disposable, a life built on other people's expectations. But I kept the things that mattered most: my dignity, my strength, and my capacity to love. The applause was warm and encouraging. These women understood her story because many of them had lived versions of it themselves. Tonight, I want to sing this song not as a testimony to heartbreak, but as a celebration of the love that stays. The love we have for our children, for ourselves, and for the people who choose to build real lives with us. The piano began the familiar introduction, but this time Sophia's voice was different. Instead of the raw pain that had made the original video so powerful, there was peace. Instead of anger, there was gratitude. Instead of desperation, there was hope. You said you loved me when the lights were low, whispered promises you'd never show, but when the morning came and truth broke through, I found out who you really were and what you'd do. As she sang, Sophia thought about Maxwell, who had disappeared from their lives completely after his brief, uncomfortable attempts at fatherhood. His marriage to Claire had lasted exactly 8 months before ending in a messy, expensive divorce. His business was struggling, and the viral video had damaged his reputation in ways that money couldn't fix. But Sophia felt no satisfaction in his failures. She had moved beyond anger into something much more powerful: indifference. Maxwell's choices had led him to a life of image management and shallow relationships. Her choices had led her to genuine love and a career that fed her soul. You left me but love stayed, you left me but love stayed, in every breath these babies take, in every choice that I will make, you left me but love stayed. In the audience, she spotted several women she recognized: domestic violence survivors she had met at various events, single mothers who had started their own businesses, women who had left bad marriages and built better lives. They were all singing along now, their voices joining hers in a chorus of survival and strength. But the verse that made her voice catch with emotion was the new one she had added just for tonight. Now I know what real love looks like. It shows up when the road gets rough, it holds my babies when they're crying, it knows that I am more than enough. She looked down at Elijah, who was standing in the wings watching her performance. His face was full of love and pride, the same expression he wore when he watched her feed the twins or listened to her practice new songs. He had seen her at her most exhausted, most overwhelmed, most human, and he had chosen to stay anyway. You left me but love stayed, you left me but love stayed, in the man who chose to build with me, in the family we were meant to be, you left me but love stayed. The final chorus brought the entire ballroom to their feet. Women were crying, hugging each other, and celebrating not just Sophia's journey but their own stories of resilience and renewal. As the last note faded, Sophia felt a completeness she had never experienced before. She had everything she needed: healthy children, meaningful work, genuine love, and most importantly, the knowledge that she was enough exactly as she was. Elijah met her as she came off stage, pulling her into his arms for a kiss that tasted like forever. I love you, he whispered against her ear. I love you too, she whispered back. Thank you for staying. Later that night, after the babies were asleep and Lucy was settled in her room, Sophia and Elijah sat on the couch in their new apartment, bigger than her old studio, with a yard where the twins could play when they got older. Any regrets? Elijah asked, his arm around her shoulders. Sophia thought about it seriously. A year ago, she might have regretted trusting Maxwell, regretted the pain and humiliation of being abandoned. But now she understood that every painful step had led her to this moment. No regrets, she said firmly. If I hadn't gone through all that, I never would have found you. I never would have discovered what I was really capable of. I never would have learned the difference between love that takes and love that gives. Outside their window, the city lights twinkled like stars. Somewhere out there, Maxwell was probably plotting his next business deal or social media comeback. But in this warm, safe space filled with the people who truly mattered, Sophia had everything she needed. The babies stirred in their cribs, and both parents got up automatically to check on them. Hope had kicked off her blanket, and Justice was sleeping with his thumb in his mouth. They were perfect, whole, and surrounded by love that would never leave them. As Sophia tucked the blanket around Hope's tiny shoulders, she whispered the words that had become her daily prayer. You are loved. You are valued. You are enough. And for the first time in her life, she truly believed those words applied to her too. Dear listeners, thank you so much for joining Sophia on her journey from heartbreak to healing, from betrayal to true love. Her story reminds us that sometimes the worst thing that happens to us can lead to the best thing that ever happens to us. I'd love to hear from you. Here are some questions to think about. What moment in Sophia's story resonated with you the most, and why? Do you think Sophia was right to sing her truth at Maxwell's wedding, Or should she have stayed professional? What do you think made Elijah different from Maxwell? What qualities make someone truly worthy of love? If you could give advice to someone in Sophia's situation, pregnant and abandoned by a partner, what would you tell them? How do you think this story would have been different if Sophia had accepted Maxwell back when he tried to return to their lives? Please share your thoughts in the comments below. Your insights and experiences help make these stories more meaningful for everyone who reads them. With love and gratitude, see you in our next video.